Omer?
Not yet. Hold on. All right, we're learning the Gemara now in the Perek Asiri, the 10th Perek, page 85-1, Pei Hey Amud Aleph on the top. Aaron, to your question, no, I haven't started anything for Lag BaOmer yet. God willing, I'm going to be doing something here in Yerushalayim at Parade. Okay, so we're holding again page. There's the Shuki note that we're starting. 1 second, guys. Okay. Gemara says like this: we're learning the laws of the punishment by choking, by strangulation, and one of those is we said in the Mishnah, the beginning of the parak, is someone who curses or hits one's parents, and in hitting it has to be a chabura, it has to be a wound that draws blood. So he says now the Gemara has a question, a technical question, which could be a very practical question. They've asked hello, Beth. Bain, what about a son? Can a son who obviously is possibly his job is to be a shliach bezdin? He's a court agent. And one of the jobs of the court agent possibly may be, if he's the sheriff, is to punish the defendant, if that's the case. And if that's something that would have to be done regularly, that's his job. In this case, the problem that we're talking about, Ariel, is that the defendant is his own father. So, like Rashi says, so let's say the father gets the punishment of lashes. And he's the court agent that would traditionally either have to excommunicate his father, which is a process done in Bezdin, if it's nidui, and that could be for monetary responsibilities that the father may have, or he may even be obligated to receive lashes, right? One of the punishments in the Torah is lashes. In this case, the person who would be giving it to him, administering the lashes, is the son. Can he do it? So, if he's in a cursing, part of the cursing is the process of putting your father in nidui, in excommunication, or to strike him. So the Gemara asks like this: what is your question? Your question is that the Torah prohibits a son, like we learned, punishable by death of strangulation, to strike one's father and draw blood and to do a chabura. So you're asking, if that's the case, what happens if there's a son whose job is to be the court agent, administer a punishment on behalf of the court on his father? So the Gemara says, but 1 second, what is your question? Your question is because it's not permitted to hit someone. So v'achar mihatiru, is someone else allowed to hit another person? No one's allowed to hit anyone at any time, right? Ella, so why is a person who's not allowed to traditionally strike someone? You can't just give someone lashes. So why, if that person is a court agent, can you give another person who's not your father lashes? Because that's his job, because he's doing it for the Bezdin. Ela kavod shemayim, adif, because it's more important in the case where the court has to administer malchus, that the other person, another person, any person, strikes someone, because you're doing it on behalf of shemayim, on behalf of Torah, on behalf of the courts, Bezdin. So hachinami kadiv shemayim adif. So too, that would apply to a son. If no one's ever allowed to strike another person, and in the case where you're a court agent, the reason you're allowed to strike someone is because you're acting on behalf of the court, and the court is acting on behalf of God, so to say, there's the Torah. So then the same thing would apply to a son when it comes to a situation where the father needs to be given malchus, lashes, because that's what the Bezdin says based on the Torah. So if it's the son who has to do it, the son has to do it. I mean, that's seemingly the answer that Reb Sheshes is giving. So Reb Sheshes is saying is that the difference, obviously, there's a lot of differences technical. Like he says, I'm going to just read the Rashi, where Reb Sheshes gives his answer. The kalala, is anyone allowed, another person, a non-relative, let's say, not even a relative, never mind a child, allowed to just curse someone else? To hit as chaveri, strike your fellow person. V'alei Yisrael hu zara. All the law is all the Jewish people have been warned. Al hakos chavireim v'al kililoisam kidalfinim b'dal. We've learned. Hey Shuki, we're holding page 85:1. So the question is, if a son is allowed to be a court agent, and administer either a nidui, which is like a curse, to put his father in excommunication, or even more, to give the father lashes. So Rab Sheshes answers, 1 second, someone else is allowed to strike another person? No, but then it comes into the case of the Bezdin, so you're acting on behalf of God, so to say. So to the son would be acting on behalf of God, and he's allowed to strike his father, in halachically, in this case, if he's a court agent. So again, Rashi says, this is the point of Rav Shesh's answer. The Kalilai, are you allowed to just curse another person, or to strike another person? All the Jewish people have been warned, you're not allowed to strike another person, or to curse another person. And as we learned, Bidal Mises, we learned the Rashi, as we learned in the Parak, in Parak called Dalad Mises on page 58. Nevertheless, even though according to halacha, you're not allowed to strike another person. But in the case of Nasa Shliach Bezin, if your job is that you are a court agent, lakach for this job, to administer the malchus or the excommunication, that it says clearly that you lash the person 40 times minus 1. And also says that there's a verse that clearly indicates that person acts as a court agent. Is you're supposed to administer the strikes. So even though on a regular day, if you weren't acting on behalf of the court, you're not allowed to. But in the case of where Bezdin finds you obligated and you need to receive lashes, someone has to do it. So in this case, obviously, so he says the same thing would apply for a son and a father. So that's the ruling of. That is the ruling of Reb Sheshes. So he was asked the question and he says yes. Now we get to complicated Gemara. The Gemara doesn't want to accept this ruling. The Gemara says like this. Meisveit. The Gemara asks a question on the ruling. Now let's understand what this means. The Gemara says if a person who's told he has to hit someone else, meaning in the case if you're a court agent, you have to give the person malchus. Mitzvah shaloi lakoisei, you're also commanded not to hit him more than a certain amount of times. Even more so, a person who's told that you're not supposed to strike this person, and he didn't even more so, you should make sure not to strike him. And what my law, so what the Gemara says, what does that statement mean? Who are we referring to? We're saying two cases. Just like someone who's commanded to hitting. What case would that be? In the case of a court agent in lashes, is commanded not to hit more than 39 times, and if you strike an extra strike, then you get punished for it, right? So a person who's commanded clearly do not strike your father. That's what we're going to assume the statement means. And it didn't then of course, then there's no case you should strike him. My life, what is this talking about? What does this statement mean? Mitzvah. Both of them are talking about a case where there's a mitzvah, which means l'shem shemayim, which means in the case of a court agent, the mitzvah says there's a mitzvah. The mitzvah says that part of the commandments of Torah is that that in a case where a person is obligated to receive malchus, someone has to apply it, right? So both of them are talking about a makkah mitzvah. What's the difference? One is talking about your son, so your son is not allowed to strike him, and another person's allowed to. So from here, from the questionnaire of the from the question of the perspective of the questionnaire of the Gemara, they understand that the case is talking about this exact question, where a person who's allowed to strike can strike only up to a certain point to someone, making sure not to do any damage, not to strike, so to say, more than the 39 times, or halachically, if a person can handle even more than 1 or 2 strikes, you don't do more than that, if the doctor says, or if he's frail, or what have you. But that's only talking about a person who's allowed to, acher. But the son is never allowed to. Like Rashi says, my love, idi ve'idi, mitzvah. It's both talking about a case where there's a mitzvah, meaning there's a case of lashing. But any mitzvah, there's a case where there's a mitzvah, and then there's beyond the mitzvah. Tavari b'maki mitzvah. One is the case of the son. And this is another place where we find the person is not supposed to stroke the father. So the Gemara says, no, loy. No, the Gemara is talking about like this. That we're talking about, doesn't make a difference if it's the son or the father. Here we're saying that there is, in a case of a mitzvah, you have to make sure that you don't strike more than the amount allowed to you, meaning it's 39, up to 39. And the second statement is talking about in general, a person is not allowed to strike another person. Meaning, if I want to understand the statement of the Talmud, it says, we would, according to the answer, we would say like this, that anyone, whether it's a father, or whether it's a son or another person, that is commanded to hit in a case of a court agent, etc., he has to make sure not to hit more than the allowed at times. So even more so, a person who's not supposed to hit, meaning in a case where it's not a court agent situation, just hitting someone for the sake of hitting someone or taking the law into your own hand, even surely then you're not allowed to hit. It's prohibited to hit. And just see the Rashi again, because Rashi brings down the verses. The Rashi is like this. Right? There's a mitzvah. You have to hit the person in a case of lashes. Mitzvah you're not allowed to hit more than 40. And it's a warning not to add any more than the 40 lashes. But no, when it comes to the son, in the son, we thought that even in the case of a mitzvah, he's not allowed to lash his father. He's not allowed to be the one who is the court agent. From here we see clearly from this brisa, from this question, that a son is not allowed to become a court agent. Even surely, he's never allowed to hit his father. Rashi says, whenever there's not a mitzvah, then you're not allowed to hit him at all. Like so the Rashi again says that we could learn clearly from here that we see clearly a warning where a person is not supposed to strike his father, because in Torah we have to have a warning and a prohibition. Okay, so from here, seemingly the Gemara wants to challenge Rabbi Sheshes initially to see from this Meisvei, where we see a son is never allowed to be a court agent. And the Gemara answers no. It's not talking about in the case that in one scenario is a court agent. They're both talking about a court agent. One is someone else, and one is the son. It's talking about when you're a court agent, you have to be careful not to hit more. And even surely, if you're not acting on behalf of the court, you're never allowed to hit. Okay, so there's no proof against Reb Sheshes. Reb Sheshes' ruling as of now still stands, that a son is allowed to be a court agent. Again, what is a court agent? A court agent is a job. That you have a job, right? It's unfortunate for you, as much as it's unpleasant, that the defendant in this case, the person in this case that we're talking about, is your father. So the Gemara wants to say, I mean, obviously, we're not going into the ethics of it, or if the uncomfortable of it, or if the son says, I don't want to. Obviously, we're not commanding the person to do it. But the question is, halachically, he's allowed to. So the Gemara continues. Yes, Aaron.
How did they come up with the number?
The Torah says. The Torah says that you're supposed to give 40 lashes. The number, and then we have the Gemara. But this is another tractate. Tractate Makos goes into the laws of lashing. We know from the Torah clearly that the lashing is up to 40 lashes. And the Gemara learns from Shabbos it's -1. And then the Gemara goes into the laws of lashing. It goes into, obviously, you're not allowed to kill someone. You're only supposed to lash someone. So they would have a doctor and they would check to administer if you're allowed to, if a person's capable of handling all of it. So if he's not, so you would give 1 lash, 2 lashes, 10 lashes, whatever amount the doctor. Aaron, I'm just going to put you on mute because there's some static coming. You have a question to ask. Unmute yourself. Hold on. Okay. So the Gemara continues. Okay. In addition, so the Gemara asks a question like this: Tashma. So, like, come and learn. So we want to ask another question. Yeah, Tashma. Hayotze laharig. Someone is being taken out to be killed by the Bezdin, right? Someone has been sentenced to death, and they're on their way to being killed. We learned already before that there was a distance between the courthouse and the place of execution. In Jewish law, unlike in civil law, We don't wait. We go right away to the execution. Obviously, we try to figure out the best way for the scenario, but at the end of the day, is once the sentence has been passed, it happens quite fast. But at the same time, we give a distance, so just in case of the walkover, some way or another, if there's someone who could figure out any reason to find zechus, to find the merit in the situation, could always call back the case. So if a person is being taken out to be killed, and there's someone standing on the side, and the son comes, vihikahu, and he hits his father, who's being taken to execution, or he curses his father. So what's the law, right? Your father is, the person's father is a dead man. He's being taken to the execution. The son is commanded clearly from the Torah that you're not allowed to curse or hit your father. But he's hitting his father after he's already been sentenced and being taken to execution. Would he also be considered a son who hits or curses his father that gets the death penalty in such a scenario? So the Gemara asked that question. Tashma, someone's being taken out to be executed. And his own son comes. Vihiko hits him. Vikilaloy curses him. So what is the law? The law says chayiv. The son is as if he hits his father. He's not allowed to. He's found obligated. That's the case if it's the father and the son. Let's say it's not the son, it's just another person on the side. Vihiko vikilaloy. And he does the same thing. He hits the person who's being taken to the execution or curses him. Pater. Now, pater, of course, means we're not sure what pater means. Pater means he's it's not mutter. Mutter means it's allowed. Pater means again, it's not. That person's not held responsible. In theory, you should be punished, both monetary, possibly lashes, for cursing or hurting someone. But here you're hurting or cursing a person that's being taken to his execution. So in this case, the law says pater. Vavinam bay. The Gemara says, and we ask the question, Mashna b'noi, Mashna yacha. What's the difference? Why a son? Both of them are commanded not to curse. You're not allowed to just curse someone and hit someone. Both a father's not allowed to do it, a son's not allowed to do it, another person. The punishment is different. For a son, the punishment is just strangulation. For another person, the punishment is possibly you have to pay monetary, right? So the case, or you get lashes. So the Gemara says that. But the son is not allowed to do it, even if his father was being sent to his execution. And someone else's pater is not obligated for whatever they would be responsible for hitting or striking or cursing someone. And Reb Chizah says, what is the scenario? The scenario is misarvim by latses ve'eni yoitza. It's talking about a person doesn't want to go to the execution, and therefore we're talking about a court agent, seemingly, who has to push the person along, curse him or hit him in order to get him to move on to follow orders, basically, and go to his execution. And what do we see from here? That if the son does it, he's chayiv. So this is against the ruling of Reb Sheshes that says a son can act as a court agent. Reb Sheshes, so the Gemara says no. Reb Sheshes mukila b'sheim esavim v'lotzes. No, Reb Sheshes disagrees with Reb Chizda. You're saying that Reb Chizda says it's talking about a case where a person is misariv, doesn't want to listen to the court, and is holding on to the table and says, I'm not going to my execution. And here we're talking about a court agent, and therefore we see clearly that a son is not allowed to act as the court agent to punish the person to go on to his execution. So Reb Sheshes said, I disagree with Reb Chizda. It's not talking about a person who's fighting the ruling. So that's the case. The Gemara says we're back to our original question. Another person also. You can't just hit someone just because the person's going to their execution and you're standing on the side. You can't just kick the person and hit the person. Who gives you the right? So the Gemara says, no. Gavra katlahu. Gavra katilahu. He's a dead man. Katila means he's a person who's going to the hanging. And therefore, even though you shouldn't do it, but you can't get punished for doing it, because you only get a punishment, seemingly a monetary punishment, if the person is alive. And here the person's going to be killed soon. So therefore, you're not allowed to do it, but you don't get punished. But that doesn't take away the obligation of a son who's never allowed to hit his father. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Reb Sheshes, where does Reb Sheshes himself gives another ruling that Baishu Yashin V'Meis. What happens if you embarrass a person who's sleeping right? You make fun of them, you really embarrass them. And then that person never wakes up from their sleep. So never knew consciously in this world, so to say, that he's been shamed because you embarrassed him while the person was sleeping or her, and then the person passes away in their sleep. So what is the rule? We know that for boishas, if you're embarrassing someone, there's a monetary responsibility for that. You have to pay someone if you embarrass them. But here the case is the person was never at any case awake to know of the embarrassment because you embarrassed him while he was sleeping. He was unconscious, and then he passed away or she passed away in their sleep. So what is such the case? But we know that Rab Sheshes himself has a ruling of such a case. Rab Sheshes, Baishin Yashin Umeis, you embarrass a person who's sleeping and the person dies. Chayiv, you have to still pay the monetary money. So the Gemara says that's a case where you've embarrassed someone or hit someone that has a value. There's a value to what you've done. You hit him in such a way that it's less than a pruta, which is the minimum amount of money you could owe someone. Meaning to say like this: when he says pater, in Torah, to owe someone money by Jews, this is not by Gentiles, by Jews, it has to be shava pruta. Pruta is a small amount of money. Anything less than a pruta, if you owe someone money, a pruta, whatever it is, or if you overcharge someone less than a pruta, or if you made a mistake in the calculation less than a pruta, the Torah assumes a pruta is a very small amount of money, that it's swallowed up. Most people, like for instance, if you charge someone $100.99, and the price was $100.98. So the Torah rules that on that one penny, it's not shava pruta, it's not the value, no one's holding it against you, and therefore the Torah writes it off. It's not, you don't owe someone that penny. So it has to be at least a shava pruta. So same thing over here, if you hit someone, so how much you hit the person is how much you have to pay them. But let's say you hit someone that's in a way that's less than even any kind of amount of money, whatever that is. You got this. So there's no value to that hit. So therefore your party, you have nothing to pay because the person walked by on his way to the execution and you gave him a tap. So it's not a pruta. But what's the thinking? But the son, if it's not, even if it's not a shava pruta, then but you hit your father, it's not a monetary. So it's about a chabura. I'm not sure if you could make a chabura less than a shava pruta. A chabura means a blemish, and less than a shava pruta is if it's less than a shava pruta, I wonder if the commentaries speak on it. 1 second. I'm not sure how it would be a
What's an abura?
A pruta, a chabura means a hit that is like with a blemish. It means a son who because then you have to understand you can never you would have to stay in a situation. Obviously, you wouldn't be strangled because you don't mean it, but you would have to be in a situation that you never touch your father, right? If you tap your father, that's someone could technically say that's a hit, right? Let's say your father's walking, and by mistake you tap him. So that could be a hit, right? So then you get strangled for that. No, it has to be a chabur. A chabur means a proper wound, like that draws blood or even blood underneath the skin. But something that's a proper wound. The Gemara goes into later what is considered a chabura, but chabura means a proper wound. The question is but here he says that but when a regular person hits another person, you also have to pay for the value of what you've done. But if the value is very little, less than a pruta is a small amount of money, then it's not you don't have to pay anything because there's nothing to pay. There's never an obligation of money less than a pruta. I'm just not sure how a hit could be less than a pruta and the same time be a chabura, meaning the son has to also be able to hit his father in such a case that he would get killed. And if it's less than the value of a pruta, then I would assume it's not a chabura. I'm not sure how that works. Well, let me see if Rashi mentions. Yeah, Rashi doesn't seem to be bothered by that. I guess you could hit. So I guess, in theory, if you were to take a needle and pierce your father's finger, so and technically you're drawing blood, I don't know if that's the value of a pruta. Maybe that, if you had a value, how much money you would have to pay for such a wound. Maybe it's not worth anything. But at the same time, technically, you draw blood. That's why
But
Rav.
let me just ask you, because you just brought up a good thing about the prick. If I so then I could not take my father's diabetic blood sample because I'd be drawing blood.
No. Last week, I don't know if you remember last week's class, we discussed this, and the ruling was that we have to lirecha kamoicha, that it's only talking about doing it to benefit in the case of your father. You're trying to help him. Nevertheless, Rav wouldn't let his son take even a splinter out of him, because if you take a splinter, you take a splinter out, even if you're just taking a splinter out with tweezers, sometimes a drop of blood, mamish, a drop of blood could come out when you take out the splinter.
It happened to me. I was in a Hasidic home, and he said, "You have to do it. I can't do it because I can't draw blood from my father."
Yeah. So, but the end is, the ruling is that Ma'aser Rav is that we don't. That if it's better not to. Obviously, if there's no choice, you don't stand there over your father who needs help and say, "Well, I don't want to hurt my father." Okay, so therefore, we're back to the case. So therefore, why would another person who strikes someone on his way to execution not have to pay? Because the value of the hit was less than a pruta, but a son would have to pay even though it's less than a pruta because it's a chabura somewhere or another. But Rav Ami says, Rabbi Yochanan, Hako she'ein b'shav pruta loika. My pater tekamar pater mamam michlal de b'noi chayev b'mamon ele b'dinei hachanami b'dinei. So the Gemara says like this. But we have another case. What are you saying? That the person who strikes the person who's walking to his execution doesn't have to pay because he struck him less than the value of a pruta. But Rav Ami says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that nevertheless you have to get lashes for that. So what does it mean, pater? Pater means only that he doesn't have to pay money. What do you want to say? The Gemara says, Michlal de b'noi chayiv mamon. You're talking about a son has to pay money to his father? The son has to get strangled if he hits his father. So what does it mean, pater? Ela bedinoi means whatever his obligation is. He doesn't have, the regular person doesn't get punished, and this person does get punished. Ela hachinami bedinoi. So therefore, what do we see clearly from here? The only scenario we could have where someone on the way to execution, where the son is not allowed to hit, and a regular person is pater from hitting, the only way it would make sense where we're standing right now from the Gemara's perspective would be a court agent, where the person who's a father, doesn't want to go to his execution, and the court agent's forced to use force to get him to go to the execution. And that's why he's not obligated. And what do we see from here? That the son's not allowed to do it. So this goes against the ruling of Reb Sheshes, that a son can be a court agent. Okay, so the Gemara says no. Okay. Now, what's the reason why this other person is pater ali achar in the time of the pater is not because he's a court agent, because there's a verse. The verse says like this: "V'nasi ba'amcha lo sa'ar." A person, a prince who's amongst your nations, you can't curse. What prohibition is there against cursing another person? But that's only talking about a person who behaves like one of the people, meaning a person who behaves like a Jew. Like Rashi says, but this person who's done a sin and is on his way to execution, that the Torah says he has to be put to death, he's not a regular person. He's not a person amongst the community, because the proof is he's just been sentenced to execution. And therefore the law of cursing such a person doesn't apply. So therefore the person who's standing on the road on the way for this person going to his execution and curses him, he's not violating any prohibition, because the prohibition says, and that includes all Jews. And here the person's not amcha, he's not a regular person. He's not a person of the community. The word amcha means a member of your nation. He didn't behave as a member of the nation. The proof is that he's on his way to his execution. So the Gemara says, 1 second. That's only teaching you that you're not, it's not a violation to curse someone. You're not transgressing a prohibition by cursing someone who's on their way to execution. That's only about a curse. And how do you know that if you hit someone, also it's not considered a violation of the prohibition of hitting someone? The verse is only talking about cursing. So the Gemara answers, that we compare hitting to cursing. That we're going to learn there's like hekesh. That that teaches, it means there's wording that teaches us that just like cursing is allowed, so too, not allowed, it's not a prohibition, so too hitting for a person who's not amcha is not a prohibition. Again, you have to remember, the word pater in Torah, and this applies mainly in Shabbos, but this applies in other cases also. There's three ways you describe someone who does something. One is the most permissible way, it's called mutar in Hebrew. It's permissible. It's permissible on Shabbos to do X, Y, and Z. Then sometimes it says in the laws of Shabbos, you're pater. The word pater means you're not found obligated, which means, like in Shabbos, it means pater av aser. You're not found obligated, but you shouldn't do it. It's forbidden to do it. And then you have chayev, which is you're considered violating, and you get a punishment. Now, this is the laws of Shabbos, but also whenever it says pater, it doesn't mean mutter. It's not permitted. It doesn't say the Torah says that you should line up a line in a court, right? What do people do nowadays in the court? They all start screaming at the defendant, cursing him, throwing at him. So the Torah doesn't say you're allowed to do it. The Torah just says that if a person does it, you can't hold the person responsible because it says, "V'nasi b'amcha lo yosar." Now you have to remember something. Once the Gemara answers this answer, then we go back on our initial statement about Shava Pruta, which means to say that even if you curse someone or hit someone more than the value of a Pruta, it's still not considered a violation because of the pasuk. This person didn't behave like an amcha. Again, it's not permissible. It's not mutter, but it's not considered. It's pater. So the Gemara says that we compare hitting to cursing. Rashi says, "What's the hekesh?" Because the Gemara doesn't bring us the hekesh. Usually, the Gemara would teach us the hekesh. The Gemara says, "If here, we learn it somewhere else." He says, "Others say that the verses are very close to each other in the Torah, so therefore we learn that whatever applies to cursing applies to hitting." But the Gemara says that therefore there's a hekesh, there's a comparison between cursing and hitting. Let's say the second answer of Rashi, the Ikadamre, which says that the verses are next to each other, and therefore we could learn cursing from hitting. And if it says V'nasi b'amcha lo yisa'or, the word amcha means a person who acts as one of the people, not a person who's just been sentenced to death. So the same thing would apply to hitting. But so now the Gemara says, fine, I hear what you're saying. B'noi nami. So why is the son also? When is the son? This Torah says you're not allowed to curse your father, you're not allowed to hit your father. But that's only if your father behaves like a person of the people. But just like when a regular person, we have a verse that teaches us, and the word amcha teaches us that you're not violating a prohibition if the person is being sentenced to death because he's no longer a person of amcha, and he's not going to be amcha because he's going to death. It's not like a person who gets lashes, that after the lashes you become one of a member of the community. Here you're going straight to your death. So if that's the case, the son also shouldn't be considered violating the prohibition of hitting or cursing your father because your father is not part of Amcha anymore. So the Gemara answers, Kedamra Pinchas. There is a difference at the end of the day between a son and a regular person, as Pinchas teaches us. That the father did repentance. So we're going back and forth. The father does repentance. So now he's not a person who's you have to remember, the Gemara teaches us, I'm not sure if the Gemara is going to talk about it here. The Gemara teaches us that Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah, after his father's death, the Imamish gave him a rough treatment. He dragged his body in the street, all these things that he did in order to help his father get atonement. The Chacham weren't happy with it. But we see that, so here the father did tshuva. The father repented. And there's another person cursing and hitting, nevertheless. And the son's not allowed to. So the Gemara says, "B'shas tshuva." Hachanam b'shas tshuva. Pinchas is talking about another case where someone did tshuva. Here also is talking about that tshuva. So the Gemara says, if the defendant did tshuva and he's on his way to he repented, like the halacha is, ihachi achanami. So if that's the case, so why is then a regular person allowed to curse him or hit him? It's not considered. It's not considered a violation. So the Gemara answers, Rav Mari ba'amcha b'mikuim sheba'amcha. So the Gemara says no, that the word amcha doesn't just mean that he's not a member of the community because he's a sinner, but ba'amcha means he's going to live. And now this person's about to die, b'mikuim, those who are alive. So therefore, he's on his death, so it's not considered the violating of the prohibition because he's on his way to his death. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, again, obviously, what's the question? The son also should apply this rule that only time a son is violating, we're turning the page to page 85-2. A son also in a case where his father is being taken to his death sentence, it's not mekuyim, he's not going to live. So why is he considered violating the law of not cursing or hitting your father? Mida the havelachamisa. All right, so the Gemara is, I don't want to say, the Gemara kind of exhausted this conversation. We had a lot of questions. Reb Sheshes has a ruling. The Reb Sheshes' ruling is that a son is allowed to be a court agent. The Gemara challenged and challenged and challenged, and hasn't come to a conclusion. It doesn't answer the question about the son. No, so the Gemara answers like this: because a son is also not allowed to curse his father even after his death. If you curse your father after his death, it's also punishable, and by another person not. So therefore, even if your father's on his way to his death, you're not allowed to. Okay. So therefore, the Gemara wants to separate. So the end of the conclusion is that that Mishnah that says that a person who's on his way to his death, another person's allowed to curse and the son's not allowed to curse, is only talking about where because he's on his way to his death, and therefore you're not considered. He's not going to be a mekuyim, he's not going to live. Whereas the son is warned not to even curse his father, not hitting his father, but not curse his father after his life. Why not? Rashi says, why not? Why is a person? Let's say a person's father dies, right? It can happen, and you're angry at your father, and you punch your father, you hit your father after his death. If you curse your father after the death, you could be put to death, but you hit your father after death. So there you don't get put to death. Why? Because there's no chabura. You can't do a chabura for someone who's dead. But you're not allowed to, but in the case where the father's not dead yet, he's just on his way to his death. So then you can do a chabura. So just like you're not allowed to curse your father after his death, and there's only a technical reason why hitting your father after the death wouldn't be considered violating the verse of not hitting your father, because you can't do a chabura. But if you hit him before he's dead, even though he's on his way to his death, to his execution, it's considered you would be put to death. Now, obviously, the Gemara, I'm not going to go into the questions about what would be the case if you hit a goisis, a person who's about to die. Is that the same thing as a person being taken to his death sentence? But basically, the Gemara says all the questions we had on Reb Sheshes are not, he has an answer for them. But what's the bottom line? My havala, what happens at the end? What's the bottom line? What's the ruling? So Amar Rabba Barav Huna, Rabba the son of Rav Huna said, V'chein Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. We also learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, L'chol ein haben nase shliach la'aviv la'hakoisi l'kalei chutz. In any case, a son is not allowed to be a court agent to hit or curse his father, aside from one case in Torah, mesis. If your father is an instigator against those instigating others to serve idols, that we know in the Torah the laws of a mesis is different than any other law. In any other law we have that you're supposed to be compassionate, try to find schusim. Someone who instigates others to convert out of Judaism and to serve idols, the Torah has zero tolerance. Chutz mi mesis, if the father's a mesis, the Torah clearly says, do not have compassion and do not try to cover up for a person who is a mesis. So the bottom end of this whole study that we learned today, again, Shuki, I said last week, I don't know if you were here last week, but we're learning in the Mishnah, Perek Elohen Nakim is chapter 11. I learned the Mishnayos recently. So the chapter 10 in the Mishnayos is the Perek Chelik. But when it came into the Talmud, they switched it around, and they put Elohen Nakim in Perek 10 and Chelik in Perek 11, the last chapter. So we're going to go quickly through this chapter 10. So that's why we're going kind of quickly, not doing any Tosfos, but or any other long commentaries, so we could get as soon as possible to Perek Chelik. With that said, we've completed this first Mishnah, and today's question of the ruling of a person who is if a person's allowed to be a court agent or not. Reb Sheshes says he is. He answers all the challenges that brought against him. Nevertheless, the Gemara concludes in the name of Rabbi Bar Chana, in the name of Rav, and also according to the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, that a son should not be a court agent to hit or curse his father, unless the case where the father is a masis, is an instigator who instigates others to serve idols. Laila Tov, happy Pesach Sheni, everyone. We'll be in touch. Take care.